Hello everybody and welcome to this webinar that is part of a Syria project funded by the Horizon 2020 program of the European Union. My name is Enrico Di Pasquale and I am a researcher for Fondazione Leone Moressa, that is an Italian research institute focused on migration and integration issues. This seminar is aimed at understanding the European asylum system and the Italian experience in the reception and integration of refugees. So first of all, let's define our topic, that is forced migration, that is part of the biggest phenomenon of migration in general, and in particular these migratory movements, forced movements, are characterized by an element of coercion, so non-choice, that can be given by natural or man-made causes. Within this concept we have three main kinds of migrants. That are, the first one is the internally displaced person, so people that is still in his own country, even he has been obliged to leave the house. The second one is the asylum seeker, that is someone that has already reached another country and is asking protection to that country because he thinks that he cannot go back home. The third category is the refugee, that is in legal terms a person who has already obtained the protection from the arrival country. According to the United Nations, today we register 68.5 million displaced people globally. The biggest part is the internally displaced with 40 million people. Then we count 25.4 million refugees and 3.1 million asylum seekers. The phenomenon interests mainly countries close to crisis areas, and in particular it's a south-to-south trend. So, for example, the main hosting countries are Lebanon, Jordan, Sudan, Uganda. Even though European countries registers in the last years a very great expansion of this phenomenon, and for this reason European institutions tried to implement some strategies. According to the European Commission, asylum is a fundamental right and granting it is an international obligation, first recognized in the 1951 Geneva Convention on the Protection of Refugees. And in the European Union, an area of open borders and freedom of movement, countries share the same fundamental values and states need to have a joint approach to guarantee high standards of protection for refugees. So, according again to the European institutions, procedures must at the same time be fair and effective throughout the European Union and impervious to abuse. The European states have committed to establish a common European asylum system, but actually we know that these principles are not always respected, and the European Union experiences a dangerous fragmentation on migration issues. In particular, we live the paradox that even asylum is considered a fundamental right, there is no legal way to enter in Europe for asking protection, so the entrance is almost always illegal. The flow of illegal arrivals reached the peak in 2015 with more than 1 million entrances. And the main route was the Eastern Mediterranean route, so through Greece. In 2016, the agreement between European Union and Turkey contributed to reduce the arrivals from that route. But the recent experience teaches that the different strategies aimed at reducing the arrivals, such as the agreement between European Union and Turkey or between Italy and Libya, can have an immediate effect, but they do not solve the causes of those flows. And here we can see the biggest flow in 2015 with more than 1 million arrivals. And here we can see the different routes: Italy, Greece and Spain, that in the last year was the more increased one. The first direct effect of these arrivals is the high number of asylum applications. Before this phase, the highest number was reached in 1992 during the former Yugoslavia war. After 2012, the number has registered a strong increase, and in 2015 and 16 the asylum application was more than 1 million. In these two last years the number has decreased, and in 2018 we are about 600,000 applications. In the last year, the highest number of applications was registered in Germany, with the 28% of all first-time applicants in Europe, followed by France and Greece. So after this big peak in 2015, the European Commission proposed a set of actions aimed at reducing the flow of migrants and to support the border countries, in particular Italy and Greece. This was the European Agenda on Migration, based on 4 pillars to manage migration in a better way. So these 4 points were reducing the incentives for irregular migration, border management, so saving lives and securing external borders, Europe's duty to protect, so a strong common asylum policy, and a new policy on legal migration. One of the most important points, actions in this agenda was the relocation action. So a solution, an answer to the migratory crisis, and aimed at reduce the pressure on Italy and Greece. So the initial proposal by the European Commission included automatic mechanisms of distribution based on measurable indicators such as GDP, inhabitants, migrants, asylum applications, unemployment, and so on. But the European Council, so member states, rejected this automatic mechanism and approved a scheme based on voluntary and negotiated quota. So even the goal was very low, many member states did not achieve their expected result. And here we can see the effective results for each country in 2 years of the program. Another point where the European institutions tried to propose a reform was the Dublin Regulation. The Dublin Regulation is an agreement that establishes the member state responsible for the examination of the asylum application. So the objective of the Dublin Regulation should be to ensure quick access to asylum procedures and examination of an application on the merits by a single clearly determined member state. But actually it determines a strong pressure on the countries of forced arrival. So observing this high pressure on few border countries, the Commission proposed to revise and replace the current asylum instruments to better manage migration flows and offer adequate protection to those in need, in line with the approach set out in the European agenda. So the proposal foresee a mechanism to monitor the number of asylum applications received and the number of persons effectively resettled by each member state. Then they suggested a reference key to determine when a member state is under disproportionate asylum pressure, and a fairness mechanism to address and alleviate the pressure. But finally, the proposal has been rejected by the European member states, so the Dublin Regulation is still working. Finally, we can talk about the Italian situation, and as we have just seen, Italy registered the highest number of illegal arrivals between 2015 and 16. Then, after the agreement with Libya, stipulated in 2017, the flow started to decrease. Differently from the Greek route, migrants arrive in Italy come mainly from sub-Saharan and Northern Africa, such as Nigeria, Tunisia, Mali, Uganda. We can affirm that a large part of these migrants is moving for economic reasons rather than humanitarian ones, but the current normative framework obliges them to take an illegal route. For this reason, almost 60% of asylum applications assessed in 2018 was rejected, and only 7% obtained the status of refugee. So the main status accorded was the humanitarian protection. But at the end of 2018, the Ministry of Interior introduced more strict criteria and practically abolished the humanitarian protection. So now it's very hard to find international protection in Italy. What about the Italian reception system? We have three main kinds of centers. The first reception is managed by governmental hubs, mainly based in the southern Italy, so close to the first arrival point. Then the distribution on the territory is managed by the Ministry of the Interior through the prefectures, which delegate the management to local private organizations. These are the extraordinary centers. And the most effective system is called SPRAR, that is a secondary reception system managed by municipalities on the basis of voluntary participation. This system demonstrated to be the best solution because of little numbers of people and very effective integration programs. But the weakness is that only the 8% of Italian municipalities participated to this program. So it's very hard for political reasons to involve municipalities in this approach. Consequently to the flow of arrivals, the peak in the reception centers was registered in 2016 and 17, and in the last year we registered a sensible decline. But the reform that I already mentioned in 2018 has aggravated the procedure, giving less possibilities for obtaining protection. And actually the risk is to create a bigger number of irregular people, also because the repatriation are very hard to be implemented, mainly for the costs and the agreement with the countries of origin. Despite these structural weaknesses, the Italian system has been able to provide some positive experiences in terms of integration of refugees. And according to the European Parliament, in Italy, measures supporting the labour market integration are implemented at an early stage and are already in the second phase of the reception process under the SPRAR system for asylum applicants. And finally, we can mention two projects managed by the Ministry of Labour, that are the project Inside and the project Percorsi, that are in different ways trying to provide integration paths or training and internships to refugees. The road is still long and difficult, but we have some positive experience to be improved. Thank you very much for your attention.